She increasingly noticed that her mood depended on him. If he was cold, she became anxious. If he was happy, the day seemed successful. Gradually, his opinion became more important than her own. His attention became something without which she couldn't feel at peace. This was the beginning not of love, but of dependency. Outwardly, it barely showed. She pretended to be in control of the situation. But tension built up inside. It became difficult to say no. Hard to leave even when something felt wrong. Even harder to be herself. Carl Jung wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." This fear of becoming too attached, of losing oneself in relationships, often goes unnoticed. But it influences partner choice, behavior, and self-perception. This fear can prevent building healthy relationships. But it can be understood and changed. Emotional dependency isn't simply strong attachment to a person. It's a state where someone else's approval, attention, or love becomes the primary source of inner stability. A person feels they can't be okay without it. Carl Jung viewed such phenomena as the result of disrupted inner wholeness. When a person loses contact with their inner self, they begin seeking validation of their worth in the external world. This manifests particularly vividly in relationships. One becomes a support for the other, not in a healthy sense, but as a replacement for their own inner foundations. From Jung's perspective, this means the person is alienated from themselves. They haven't integrated their shadow, those parts of personality that were repressed because they seemed unacceptable or weak. Emotional dependency often conceals unprocessed fear of abandonment, fear of loneliness, the belief that without another person one is worthless. All of this is material for shadow work. Until it's made conscious, relationships become a way to escape from oneself rather than a way to grow. The fear of becoming dependent doesn't appear suddenly. It forms from personal experience, past environment, and internal beliefs. Most often, in early childhood. If a child didn't receive stable emotional support in childhood, they might grow up feeling that love is unstable, dangerous, or something to fight for. Such a person might develop the inner conviction, if I open up, they'll leave me, or, if I get too attached, they'll hurt me. This fear often masquerades as a drive for independence. A woman might say she doesn't need anyone, that she can manage alone. But behind this might hide another extreme, fear of feeling weak and defenseless again as she once did. Carl Jung believed that people repress parts of themselves that were rejected or traumatized. This becomes the shadow. If dependency was associated with pain in the past, the person tries not to feel it at all, but the fear remains inside. This fear can manifest in relationships as distance, suspicion, closedness, or conversely, strong attachment and anxiety. These are two sides of the same problem, an attempt to avoid confronting inner pain that still hasn't been processed. In Jungian psychology, the shadow isn't something external or sinister. It's everything a person doesn't want to see in themselves. Everything they consider weak, shameful, undesirable, falls into the shadow. Carl Jung explained, from early years a person learns what they can show the world and what they cannot. They suppress certain traits to meet expectations. Those aspects not accepted by society, parents, or themselves go into the unconscious. This doesn't disappear, it just hides. And over time, it begins to control from within. Emotional dependency is one such repressed aspect. It's connected to need, vulnerability, the desire to be loved and accepted. But if these feelings were once rejected, for example, considered weak or shameful, the person learns to hide them. They might strive to be strong, independent, controlling. But inside remains what didn't receive recognition: the need for closeness, fear of being unwanted, desire for support. All of this becomes part of the shadow. The more strongly a person tries to deny their dependency, the more power it gains inside. Because what's repressed doesn't disappear. It accumulates and emerges in behavior that can no longer be controlled. So a woman who fears dependency might end up in relationships where she becomes completely subordinated to her partner. Or conversely, she pushes away those dear to her just to avoid feeling weak. This is the shadow's trap. What we deny becomes our master. Jung wrote that the path to wholeness begins with acknowledging the shadow. This doesn't mean surrendering to dependency. It means seeing it, understanding where it came from, and stopping the fear of one's own vulnerability. Then it stops controlling. Carl Jung argued, a person rarely sees another as they truly are. They see their projection in the other, that part of themselves they haven't yet recognized. This manifests particularly vividly in close relationships. When a woman meets a man, she might unconsciously endow him with images that live inside her: the ideal partner, savior, protector, source of love. These are unconscious expectations and desires that formed in early childhood. Sometimes, these are images of her father or those who embodied strength and security. This is how projection forms. The man becomes not simply a person, but a carrier of what the woman feels she lacks. He transforms into everything, the source of significance, stability, love, confidence. The stronger the projection, the higher the emotional dependency. The woman is no longer simply alongside, she internally merges with the image she created. And if he leaves, not only is the partner lost, but the entire construction on which her stability rested. Such a breakup is perceived not as the end of a relationship, but as the destruction of an entire world. This is a sign of deep projection. Jung emphasized, the path to mature relationships lies through removing projections. Only when a person realizes they've invested their inner images in another can they begin to see their partner as a separate individual, not as a carrier of their shadow or dream. Projections aren't mistakes, but stages. But if they remain unconscious, they turn relationships into a field of dependency rather than freedom. The fear of emotional dependency might not manifest itself obviously. It often masquerades as a drive for self-sufficiency, restraint, or even indifference. But this fear always operates from within, and gradually destroys what the woman wants to preserve. The paradox is that, fearing becoming dependent, she begins to distance herself. To maintain control, she suppresses feelings, doesn't allow herself to show need, ask for support, or display attachment. Emotional coldness and distance appear. Inside, fear of being vulnerable. Outside, a mask of strength. Such a mask makes the woman inaccessible. She might seem confident but remains internally lonely. The partner feels this, and also closes off. Sometimes the opposite happens. The woman, instead, immerses herself completely in the relationship. She lives her partner's life, forgetting about herself. This creates codependency. Any changes in his mood are perceived as threats. Without him, nothing seems to have meaning. Both extremes, distance and merger, have the same foundation: internal conflict. The woman wants to be loved but fears losing herself. She wants closeness but fears pain. This conflict makes genuine intimacy impossible. Inside her lives a prohibition. If I open up, they might hurt me. Carl Jung believed that only awareness and acceptance of one's shadow can lead to genuine growth. As long as the fear of dependency controls behavior, relationships are built on defense, not trust. And even strong feelings might not withstand this internal struggle. Carl Jung called individuation the process by which a person becomes themselves, whole, aware of their nature, and accepting their internal contradictions. This isn't simply psychological development. It's a deep journey to oneself, where conscious and unconscious gradually unite. The fear of emotional dependency is a signal that a person hasn't yet found inner support. They seek it externally, in a partner, in love, in validation. But while this support is outside, it's unstable. Any fluctuation from the other causes anxiety. Individuation helps break out of this cycle. This isn't a path to complete rejection of closeness. It's a path to balance. An emotionally mature person can be in relationships while not losing themselves. They know, closeness is a choice, not a necessity. Love is an exchange, not dependency. Jung emphasized that wholeness doesn't mean perfection. It's accepting one's vulnerability, fear, need. It's readiness to see one's shadow and not reject it, but integrate it into one's personality. Only then can one become internally free, and free in love. Recognizing the simple fact, I can love and be free, is already a step toward maturity. This isn't rejecting feelings. It's agreeing to be real without masking or hiding. When internal conflict dissolves, the woman no longer fears either closeness or solitude. Because in any state, she remains herself. Overcoming the fear of emotional dependency isn't an instant solution. It's a process. In the Jungian model, it begins with the main thing: recognizing the shadow and returning to the inner self. The first step is acknowledgement. To realize, yes, there is fear in me. I'm afraid of becoming dependent. I'm afraid of being rejected. I'm afraid that without another person I'll feel empty. This isn't weakness, this is the starting point. Jung said the path to light leads through darkness. And this darkness might be an honest look at one's inner insecurity. One effective tool is keeping a journal. This isn't simply recording thoughts, but a way of having a conversation with oneself. Through regular entries, one can identify recurring emotions, fears, and reactions. This helps bring the unconscious to the conscious level. Working with a psychologist is another important step, especially if there are strong internal blocks that can't be overcome independently. Psychotherapy helps safely look into the shadow and stop fearing what's found there. The next stage is restoring contact with oneself. This means learning to listen to yourself. What do I want? What do I feel? What's important to me? In relationships, this is expressed by the woman no longer losing herself for another. She stays with herself and builds connection not from fear but from choice. Working with projections is particularly important. One needs to ask oneself, what do I see in this person that I lack in myself? If he provides a sense of security, where in my life do I feel insecure? If he's the only source of warmth, what prevents me from being warm toward myself? Projections lose power when they're seen. Then instead of illusion, reality appears. And in reality, genuine closeness is possible, not based on fantasy but on mature contact between two people. Carl Jung once said, "Love is not the merging of two halves. It's the union of two wholes." These words summarize the entire journey a person takes when overcoming the fear of emotional dependency. When inner emptiness stops being something that urgently needs to be filled by another person, a new reality appears. In this reality, love no longer arises from need. It arises from freedom. Not as a way to survive, but as a way to be together without losing oneself. A woman who has met her shadow no longer fears being alone. Not because she doesn't care, but because she has found inner support. She can be in relationships without losing herself. She can love without sacrificing her freedom. She can accept another person without turning them into the source of her self-worth. Liberation from the fear of dependency isn't escape from feelings. It's returning to oneself. It's the ability to be in love while remaining honest, open, and whole. Every woman has strength. But this strength isn't about being cold, inaccessible, or always strong. True strength is in the ability to look inside oneself. In honesty. In the courage to acknowledge one's fears. In readiness not to run from pain, but to understand what it teaches. The path to freedom isn't outside. It's within. In every question that's been long postponed. In every feeling that once seemed inappropriate. In every meeting with one's true self, without masks, without defenses, without excuses. Development isn't about becoming someone else. It's about reclaiming yourself. Love begins with you. Not because you need to become perfect, but because you're already worthy of being loved, when you know who you are. Don't be afraid to look deeply. That's where the answers lie. That's where real life begins. And that's where the kind of love is born that you'll no longer fear losing.